Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Facebook family. Again, this is Millionaire Williams, and I am here to share with you some historical facts as it relates to the honorable mention of the Tuskegee Airmen. I'm here for Black History Month to share those that have entered the armed services at a time when racism and discrimination were at an all-time high, and in this country, and how blacks suffered in the armed services. You know, a lot of times people don't think about that. I know we're dealing with it still today, and it's sad to say that it is an atrocity. And but the historical background of what some of our people have gone through is just incredibly amazing to me. And when I think about the armed services, you know, that you're going to fight for a country who really does not care about you and will still treat you like a second-class citizen once you're back on American soil. And it grieves my heart to know what they've gone through. And the first week of February, I talked about the Buffalo Soldiers. And the second week of February, I talked about the Harlem Hellfighters. And so today, I'm going to be reading and giving you historical facts as it relates to the Tuskegee Airmen, which I know a lot of us are, we know about the Tuskegee Airmen. You know, a lot of times people have never heard of the Harlem Hellfighters, but the Tuskegee Airmen have certainly, you know, gotten recognition, and there's awareness in this country, you know, about what they've gone through, what they did, and those red tails. And so, in honor of those red tails today, I am, yes, and also the sacrifice of blood. And so, I am wearing red for a very specific reason. And the Tuskegee Airmen happened back in March 19th, 1941. But I also am going to read to you how African American history came about. And these references are from Diversity Resources, Inc. and the Electronic Diversity Resource Calendar. So it reads to describe to you, Linda, how are you? So thankful to have you in with me, joining in. Bless you, my dear. But in 1926, Dr. Carter G. Woodson instituted the first week-long celebration to raise awareness of African Americans' contributions to history. Prior to this time, little information could be found regarding African American history. Important achievements were left out of history books, and there was a general misconception that African Americans had made little contribution to U.S. society or history. And here it is. It's still, I mean, that was 1926. I would say that that still is happening today. I mean, not as bad, but it is. So, you know, for those of you that don't think that there's a need for February to be acknowledged for African American history, Black history, these are facts, and it's still showing, and it's still happening in today's age in 2021. But as I read, because those of you that have heard me, you know I have a lot of commentaries. I've got an opinion about a few things. So, and then this being my broadcast, I can have that liberty to do that. It's called free speech, I believe. And so 50 years later, the week became a month. Hello, Viviana. Love you, girl. So good to see you. 50 years later, the week became a month, and today, February is celebrated as African American History Month. The month of February was chosen because it celebrates the birthdays of Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass, both of whom dramatically affected the lives of African Americans. Frederick Douglass lived from 1817 to 1895. He was a writer, lecturer, editor, and civil rights activist who escaped slavery at age 21. Jeffrey Grant, Glen Cove, that's what I'm talking about, and went to campaign for the abolition of slavery, establish a newspaper, and hold the office of minister to Haiti. And you know, it's so funny because someone was sharing with me that they've watched broadcasts here on African American history. And I didn't even know that this was told, but someone stated that, because February has the least amount of days in the year. And someone said, oh, yeah, that's why they chose February as the month, so it could be the least amount of information that they could receive. But I told her, I said, no, that's not the case. People with fake news always come about. So, sometimes you need to hear the facts and historical data to get rid of those misconceptions or myths or things that just kind of come about and it's just passed along generation after generation. So the reason that February was chosen, not because it was the shortest month of the year to slight black people, it was chosen because of Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass, because of their birthdays, okay? And Frederick Douglass was a major voice in the anti-slavery civil rights movement of this time. Abraham Lincoln, born February 12, 1809, as the 16th President of the United States, issued the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1, 1863, thereby declaring that all slaves within the Confederacy would be permanently free. And an editorial of mine, on paper free, but mindsets still enslaved. I'm just saying. Each year, the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, founded by Dr. Woodson, sets the theme for the month. So I always like to give that backdrop of the historical account of Black History Month, how it got started, how it was initiated, how it came about, and the facts to let people know. And so with that being said, this is my 37th week of broadcasting on Facebook Live. And normally I'm here each Thursday morning from 8 a.m. to 8:45. And at that time, I have been commissioned by the Lord to pray for a different state of the United States of America. And like I said, this is my 37th week doing it. And I pray for those that are in the military, active duty, deployed, veterans, military families, and issues that concern military and veterans. And that's my space, that's my lane, and also the fact that mental illness, you see the backdrop there, my banner, it's Military Mom on a Mission and Advocate for Mental Health. It's a book that I wrote and it was published last July. And so I've been operating in that space when it comes to veterans and mental well-being because of my son having gone through what he went through, a full major mental breakdown 6 weeks after he was discharged from the military. And that began a whole nother journey for our family. But I can say today, and I have the 2 cameras going, so that's why I'm back and forth, just to let you know, is the fact that he's doing very well today, and I'm grateful to God for that, and all of the above. So with that being said, let's dig into the Tuskegee Airmen and find out. And oh, I must say as well, I'm so honored to say that in my book, which this is my book, but on page, let's see here, 17, there is a picture of a Tuskegee Airman in my book, and I knew him as a child because his family, they grew up in the same town that I did in Glen Cove, New York. So I've got to give honorable mention to him because he was certainly an incredible man, incredible man. But I will do that after I read about the Tuskegee Airmen, so you'll get the full backdrop on who they are. Hello, Santana Marie. So the Tuskegee Airmen. The Tuskegee story is an important civil rights story of Americans who happen to be black, in service to their country, their family, and to their friends, in that order. Colonel Charles E. McGee, National President of the Tuskegee Airmen. Though it can be said that the Tuskegee Airmen are to military aviation what Jackie Robinson is to Major League Basketball, it is surprising that many Americans, both young and old, still have not heard of them. But those of you listening today, please share this information with all your family and friends, so this information can be told and this information can be shared, and so that we get an account, and a historical account and a true account of these brave men that served this country in such an honorable fashion. They deserve honor and respect even today in 2021, because these are the ones who paved the doors, who opened the doors, because somebody had to go in that door first, which has allowed so many to come in after. Prior to World War II, many in the military believed that African Americans would not perform well in combat and were incapable of flying. A 1925 study conducted by the Army War College concluded that African Americans were inherently ill-suited for combat physically and psychologically. You know, sometimes in reading this stuff, it takes some deep breaths, and I gotta take it in. So coming back down. In 1939, the government began establishing flight schools at colleges around the nation, but refused to do so at any of the black colleges. So when people say systematic racism, here you have it. Let me read it again, because this is the epitome of systematic racism, where people don't want to believe that it exists. Okay? It's been going on from day one. But let me read the facts for you, okay? In 1939, the government began establishing flight schools at colleges around the nation. And here's an operative word, but refused to do so at any of the black colleges. That part right there is just a drop the mic moment. A Howard University student lodged a lawsuit in protest, and thanks to mounting pressure from black newspapers, the NAACP, and sympathetic government leaders, including President Franklin D. Roosevelt and his wife, Eleanor, the Tuskegee experiment was begun. A flight school was founded at the historic Tuskegee University in Alabama, and on July 19, 1941, the Army Air Corps initiated the program. At its inception, 12 cadets and 1 officer, Captain Benjamin O. Davis, Jr., who later became the Air Force's first African-American general, were in the program. And there's probably people that don't even know that the Air Force had a black general. But here you got some facts. These and later graduates became known as the Tuskegee Airmen and formed the 99th Pursuit Squadron. The 99th fought with distinction in the Mediterranean theater and later joined 3 newer Tuskegee squadrons to form the 332nd Fighter Group. The 332nd distinguished itself in Italy, flying combat missions and escorting bombers. The Tuskegee experiment was expected to fail. However, not only was the program a milestone in training African Americans as military pilots, but the Tuskegee Airmen went on to succeed with flying colors. Think about that. A group of people by the government refused to allow training in black colleges, black universities at the time. Because, let me go back and read. A 1925 study conducted by the Army War College concluded that African Americans were inherently ill-suited for combat physically and psychologically. And the sad part about racism and discrimination, this is what happens. And I always tell people, man does not create human beings. I know they're doing all kind of genomes and all kind of studies now, okay? And I'm quite sure we're walking around with robots and they look just like you and me, act like you and I, so that artificial intelligence, but that's another day, another story. But racism comes from a place. Comes from a place of thinking that one is superior and one is incompetent. One is capable and one is incapable. But it's so interesting to read that the Tuskegee Airmen went on to succeed with flying colors. And as with anybody, human being, I always say to people, did you choose to come out to be black or white? Did you make a choice in your mother's womb to have melanin in your skin or not? I don't think you did. I don't think so. So I don't get it. This wasn't a choice that I made to come out of my mother's womb as a black woman, African American woman, all the different things that we're called and we're told. So how is it that such hatred just because the color of a person's skin tone, that you have no idea the IQ, the intellect, the emotional intelligence, what they're capable of doing, their past accomplishments. And I got to stop for a second because it just drew a thought process. I remember when I was chosen to be an interim president for the Chamber of Commerce that I worked back in North Carolina. And I was the only black working there at the time. There was probably about 10 or 11 on staff. And I'll never forget, the president at the time, she had gotten very ill. And she was in the hospital. It was on a Sunday, early evening. My husband and I got in from church, ate early dinner, and we were just relaxing, chilling, watching TV. We put on pajamas early, and the phone rings. No. Basically, no. Phone didn't ring. That was another situation. I have plenty of stories. But what winds up happening, because we were in church, I had my ringer down. So when we got home, I didn't turn it up. So later on, I turned up the ringer and I checked my voicemail, and there was a voicemail from the president's husband. And I'm like, why is he calling me? And so, sorry about that call coming in. And so what winds up happening, I listen to the voicemail, and he's letting me know that his wife is in the emergency room, and she requested for me to come up to see her. And I'm like, and at the time I was, it was my role at the time. I was the director for Minority Business Services Division there at the Chamber. And so, I'm like, why she calling me? Why she want me to come up there? Okay. And at the time, out of all the employees, I was the last one, employed. So everybody else had seniority, had been there years. So anyway, I tell my husband, we get dressed, he takes me up there. And so she has a conversation with me. It pretty much went like this. Million, I'm going to be out for a minimum of 6 weeks. And I want you to step in my role while I'm out as president. I was like, wow, a God moment, okay? That's why, whatever God has for you, please know as I look at you from a person that has lived the experience, that no demon in hell, no man, no woman can take away what God has assigned, appointed, commissioned, and proclaimed for your life. Please know that. I have so many stories I could share, and maybe one day I need to just share these stories to just give confidence in the power of who God is in our lives. Because I am telling you, that came out of nowhere. Well, the reason that, this came to my mind as I was reading here, because I'll never forget the director of tourism worked there, and she and I had a date. We were going to a museum in another town to talk with the tourism director of that town or something. So anyway, I told her that I would drive. We get in the vehicle, and she unleashed. I was like, preach. Bottom line, she wanted to know, why was I chosen to be the interim president? And, you just got here. We've been here 9 years, 10 years. You just got here. You've been here less than a year. How is that happening? And she's in my vehicle. And I'm like, really? Tell me how you really feel. So I was just cool, calm, and collected. I said, I don't go around bragging what I've done, my accomplishments, because who cares? Like in car sales, they'd say, you're as good as your last sale. You could have made $1 million 2 years ago, but if you're not making anything today, okay, but I'm just saying. So anyway, I said to her, just because you don't know what's on my resume, just because you don't know my past accomplishments, because I don't wear them on my chest, again, who cares? But I had to take this opportunity and break it down for her, why I was chosen. I said, okay, well, let me give you some, here we go, historical facts. I said, number one, prior to coming here, I worked 26 years for the largest healthcare organization. I said, you've heard of the term HMO? Health Maintenance Organization is what that stands for. I said, I worked for Henry J. Kaiser Hospital, Kaiser Permanente in Los Angeles on Sunset Boulevard in Vermont for 26 years. When I started, I was entry level. By the time I left, I moved 5 levels up, okay? That's just one start. I said at one point, I was director of admitting. We had approximately 5,000 employees at that facility. I also was director of patient revenue services. I had these 2 departments. Anybody knows anything about hospital work? Admitting department. It's a 24-hour unit. and I had close to 50 employees. I said, so I could really go on and give you the full-fledged of what I've done, what I've accomplished, and I've got letters of recognition to support, facts, data. You can call the HR department there and find out. I said, so you want to know why I was chosen? Because I'm a quit, sweetheart. I said, and take a hint. I pray that you do your job in a way that you continue to do and not test my abilities of what I'm capable of doing. Because now that I walk in the authority, trust and believe, I have no problem executing my authority. So, with that being said, let's enjoy our ride and go on to this appointment and enjoy the rest of the time. I said, do you have anything else you'd like to share or say? And how many years have you been working here? How many years have you worked at any one facility? And how many levels have you gone up? And how much money have you made? I don't want to drop the salary figure on you, but how much? But how many employees have you? Okay. All right. And she apologized. But see, that's because of the color of my skin. And I didn't go around bragging about my leadership abilities. It wasn't necessary. When they asked me to take the job, I didn't even apply for it. They came to me, the president calls me and wanted me to come on board and work with them. So, I'm just saying that, and I had to share that for somebody out there listening, that as I'm talking to you right now, God is doing some things in the background of your life that you're completely unaware of. But in time, he will show it forth. Because the scripture says that he will place a table in front of your enemies. And guess what? They won't be invited at the table to eat with you. But guess what? They will watch from afar the table that has been prepared for you and for me. So I'm just saying, just know, who's ever gone through some stuff and being challenged, hold on and hold on to the Lord, what he said. Okay? So that's for somebody. Amen. But getting back to the Tuskegee Airmen, okay. So they succeeded with flying colors when they didn't think that they would succeed. Remember, they had said blacks were not ready for combat. Psychologically, they weren't ready. Physically, they weren't ready. But God. Okay, so Tuskegee pilots garnered some of the most envied military records in history. I'm just saying. And more importantly, advanced the American civil rights movement by setting the precedent that would force the American military to begin to fully integrate in 1948, more than a decade before Martin Luther King Jr. marched on Washington. The Tuskegee program also forged a group of men who would earn advanced degrees and make notable achievements in the fields of law, social policy, politics, medicine, education, and finance. Those are all the mountains here. Pillars of life. Surprisingly, aviation was not on the list, as private aviation industries were closed at the time to African Americans. That the 926 service members who graduated from Tuskegee succeeded at a time when racist attitudes were officially sanctioned in the military is a testament to the men's extraordinary determination to succeed as pilots, which by its nature is one of the most academically psychologically challenging areas of military service. And they went on to do it with such excellence. My God. The program at Tuskegee. Hands down, Tuskegee was much harder, says Harold Hoskins, shaking his head. As a former student both at Tuskegee and later at an integrated pilot school at Texas Randolph Air Force Base, and having served under Colonel Benjamin Davis and logged 9,500 flight hours in the Air Force, Hoskins is in a unique position to compare both experiences. Since retiring from the Air Force, he became Assistant VP of Student Affairs at California State University in Hayward. Quote, the Tuskegee program was so rigorous, you didn't have time to think, says Hoskins. A history master's student who happened to be Jewish was interviewing me for her thesis, asked me if I knew anything about the Holocaust. Honestly, all that was on my mind was, can I get through this program? I didn't have a faintest idea about the Holocaust, nor about anything else that was happening in American society, either, for that matter. Unquote. An initial part of the Tuskegee experience was getting hazed by upperclassmates. You can only imagine. A tradition brought over from the military academics in 4 national black fraternities where many cadets had gone to school before enlisting in the Army Air Corps. Cadets were forced to eat a square meal. They were only allowed to sit in one corner of their dining room chair, made to sit perfectly straight, and bring their forks from their plates to their mouth at a perfect right angle without moving their heads. If food was dribbled, the cadet had to stand up and scream the humiliating phrase, I am a sloppy dummy. Can you imagine the psychological warfare? The emotional abuse? You can't. But yet, here in this country, 2021, we're still dealing with all of this. When you think about it, it's unbelievable sometimes just to think about it. But the stuff that they went through, it's amazing, incredible. Pre-flight cadets were also awoken in the middle of the night, ordered to put on their rubberized ponchos and gas masks, and made to do various physical drills all night, while still being expected to do their full physical training regimen in the morning, which began at 6 a.m., as well as class all afternoon. It's despicable. Quote, I guess it was supposed to make you tougher, explains Hoskins. But when I got to Texas, I found out that those white boys had no idea what hazing and phasing was all about. I didn't let on, but Texas was a piece of cake. Just to give you an example, we had to hem our own pants and sew on our own buttons on our shirts at Tuskegee. At Texas, we had tailors. He laughs. At Texas, they even customized our shirts so they fit just right and we looked sharp. At Tuskegee, we had to make sharp folds in our shirts, wrapping them sometimes all the way to our backside to make them fit properly. Unquote. It is important to note that at this time, African American pilots trained at Tuskegee, the military was still completely segregated. Amazing. Which means the pilots' planes serviced by African American mechanics and other specialists. Armament specialists trained at Lowry Field in Colorado, radio specialists at Scott Field, Illinois, and mechanics at Chanute Army Air Force Airfield in Illinois. And I'm almost running out of time, and I really didn't even finish all of this. And I think what I'm going to do is go ahead and finish up here because the next segment talks about combat operations. And I really want to pay homage to honorable mention to these great men that served this country in a way that goes well beyond what we can even imagine and what they went through. And I think I will end up with my book. And this is a chapter in my book, Honorable Mention, First African Americans in the Military. And this is the Tuskegee Airmen. And this is me speaking. I am privileged to say that I personally know a Tuskegee Airman. He lives in Glen Cove, New York, where I grew up. Below is an article in which Congressman Swazi of New York interviewed Joe Johnson at his home and spent some time with him. The article tells the story of the Tuskegee Airmen. And so, yeah, I can read that because it's not that much. September 10th, 2019. And just to show the picture of him again, this is a Tuskegee Airman that I knew growing up in New York, Glen Cove, New York specifically. And he just recently died about a month ago. And prior to that, he and I, my sister, we had a relationship. We would always call and check on him. And he was in his 90s and an incredible man, incredible man. And to have the privilege of knowing a Tuskegee Airman on a personal level, been to his home, and a little caveat to the story is amazing because prior to he getting married, my mother getting married, they used to date in their early 20s, so that's really special to me as well. But reading here from my book, September 10th, 2019, and this is an article on him. Discussed service to our country and overwhelming racial barriers. On Monday, Congressman Tom Swazi, Democrat of Long Island, Queens, visited and spent some time with William, quote, Joe Johnson, a Tuskegee Airman and Glen Cove hometown hero. The congressman presented Mr. Johnson with an American flag that flew over the U.S. Capitol. Additionally, he listened to the veteran stories of his service to our country during World War II, the racial barriers that he had to overcome to become an aviator, and his childhood growing up in Glen Cove. Joe Johnson is one of my, this is a quote from the congressman, Joe Johnson is one of my hometown heroes. He personifies all that I love about Glen Cove, said Swazi. As part of the greatest generation, he preserved to overcome racial barriers and served our country proudly during World War II. Never forget the vet is so much more than a hashtag. It is important that we sit down and listen to the stories of bravery and heroism of those who fought for the liberties that we enjoy today. Glen Cove was a wonderful community to grow up in. I lived on Cottage Row across from the church. This is Joe Johnson speaking. There were 10 in my family. We went fishing, swimming. I thought I was a Huckleberry Finn, said Johnson. I was the only black male in my graduating class. My teachers were great, even though that there were no black teachers. I grew up with everyone together, especially the Italians. Unquote. The fourth of 9 children, Joe was born in 1925 in North Carolina. When he was 4 years old, his family moved to Glen Cove to escape the racism that was so pervasive in the South. Johnson graduated from Glen Cove High School in 1943 and then joined the Army Air Corps. Growing up on Long Island, the cradle of aviation, Johnson knew he wanted to become a pilot. He applied for U.S. Army Air Corps Flight Training Program and began pilot training at the Tuskegee Airfield in Alabama in 1944. After the war, Johnson attended college and then returned to his hometown of Glen Cove, where he raised 3 children. He worked at Grumman Aerospace for 28 years, eventually becoming a supervisor and retired in 1990. The Tuskegee Airman was the first black military aviator in the U.S. Army Corps, a precursor of the U.S. Air Force. activated at the 99th Pursuit Squadron in September of 1941 at Chinook Field, Illinois. The squadron trained at the Tuskegee Army Airfield in Tuskegee, Alabama, becoming known as the Tuskegee Airmen. Hello, Dr. Pam. So good to have you this morning. The squadron included pilots, navigators, bombarders, maintenance and support staff, and instructors. During World War II, the Tuskegee Airmen flew more than 15,000 individual sorties, guess I'm pronouncing that right, in Europe and North Africa, earning more than 150 distinguished flying crosses. Thank you. After the war in Europe ended in 1945, the Tuskegee Airmen returned to the United States, where racial segregation remained the rule in both the U.S. Armed Forces as well as throughout much of the country. And we're talking about 1945. And what is today's date? Yes. February 18th, 2021. And we're still having this conversation. Don't get it. And we'll never get it. And don't ever want to get that. But let me get on back. Because you know the editorials, that's something that Million has. Okay. Their exemplary service paved the way for the racial integration of the military. In 1948, President Harry Truman signed Executive Order 9981, mandating equality of opportunity and treatment to all in the United States Armed Forces, effectively setting the stage for racial integration throughout the other areas of American society. And one thing my husband has always told me, and he's 27-year Marine, retired, everything always starts in the military. GPS started in the military. When he went down a list of all the things that started, historically, that we now have the privilege of, but it all starts in the military. So, just say. And this is a quote. When you were a Tuskegee Airman, the color of your skin didn't matter. The content of your character did, said Johnson. I loved flying, and the Tuskegee Airmen gave me a chance, just like everyone else. It was my greatest adventure, and I am blessed to have been a participant. Unquote. So, I'm just saying, this country, I always say, America, you've got to do better. You've got to do better. And so I have just run out of time, but I will be here next Thursday, and I will highlight the Mumford Point Marines. Hoorah! My son was a Marine, and my husband was a Marine. So, that's pretty special to me as well. And I've worked with some Mumford Point Marines because the Mumford Point Marines were right there in the town that I lived for 14 years in Jacksonville, North Carolina, is where they derived. So I will look forward to sharing that. And let me say, instead of taking on the Mumford Point Marines next Thursday, I'm going to finish up the Tuskegee Airmen because I just really believe this is very important for us, our history, to know the facts, to know this part of society when it comes to the military, the things that we've experienced there. A lot of times you don't really hear a lot about the military and the racial disparity that went on, but I want to finish up giving honor and honorable mention to the Tuskegee Airmen and what they meant to our heritage, what they meant to this country, because it's all American history as well. So stay tuned. Thank you for being here with me. Again, this is Millionaire Williams, and I look forward to finishing up with you on the Tuskegee Airmen next Thursday. Be blessed and stay safe and stay connected to our military. Thank you. Bye-bye.